We are live.
And we are live.
Mhm.
Welcome, everyone, to another Facebook Live with Dr. Nelva Bryant. I am Greta Russo, and of course, this is Dr. Bryant. And we would like to welcome you on today's journey with our guest, Rachel, where we will talk about zoo animals. But in the meantime, Dr. Bryant, if you could please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi there, everyone. Thanks for listening in today and following me. My name is Dr. Nelva Bryant. I'm a veterinarian and I work in the airline industry. I work with Delta Airlines. And um, we've developed One Pets Fly to share information on pet travel and actually animal transportation in general. We bring on different stakeholders in the pet travel industry and to share information to prepare animals, pets, just for air transport. So I'm very passionate about this, and that's me. Greta, please introduce yourself.
My name is I am not a doctor. My name is Greta Russo, and I am the resident pet parent. And I'm really enjoying this journey, a lifelong animal advocate, and I love all animals. Well, not all. There's some I don't like, but I help Dr. Bryant in any way that I can to help get her message across to all of you in what is best for animal transportation. So that's me.
That's awesome.
Well,
Awesome sauce. Awesome.
well,
I
you
can't
know,
do what I do without you, so I really appreciate you.
oh, thank you so much. Well, last week we had a really great conversation with our guests, and we were talking about the news of the day, which was American Airlines changing their policy just a little bit to be, I guess, more pet parent friendly when it comes to bringing their pets on board. But this week, you shot me an interesting article with new requirements for importing dogs into South Africa.
Right.
So, and I wanted to give you a chance to talk about that with our audience. And I think that'll be a great subject to also bring up with our guests today.
Definitely. A lot of folks that are traveling with their pets or other animals need to realize that whatever country you're going to has their own importation requirements for that animal, and you must comply with it. The USDA Pet Travel website is a great site to look for to review the requirements. What we learned today, and Greta mentioned, is that the requirements for South Africa has changed. So please, when you're traveling internationally, realize, we love our pets, we almost humanize them, but we have to realize they're an animal, and to go to a different country, there are particular requirements. Again, the USDA Pet Travel website is a great place to look and work with your veterinarian to make sure the requirements are met. It's not going to take 10 days. It might take months for you to meet those requirements. So be aware of that. So as soon as you know you're going to travel with your pet, say this months out, start working with your veterinarian early on to make sure your dog or cat or other animal meet the requirements of the destination.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that one site. Will that house all of the requirements for all countries, or are there other references they should go to?
For the most part, it does have all the requirements for the countries that are listed. Another thing I could just share briefly with me to help my fellow veterinarians, I have a chapter in Ettinger's textbook of veterinary internal medicine on international pet travel. So it's 2 pages, but it helps the veterinarian as far as guiding them through the process and realizing the requirements. Might be microchipping is needed. Certain blood tests will be needed as far as a baby's titers sometimes. The pet might have to be fully vaccinated against all vaccine preventable diseases. They have to be dewormed, have no heartworm. It varies. Be aware some countries also have requirements on the type of animals they allow to enter. I believe, was it, what's her name? Rebecca recently had an article out or blog out talking about going into the UK that there's restrictions on the pit bulls and bully breeds. So you have to be mindful of that when you're traveling to these international destinations. But again, that chapter in Edwards helps the veterinarian guide through that process so they can help the pet owner.
Yeah, it would be so easy to think that you just buy a ticket for your dog or cat and you just jump on the plane, but it's not that easy. And there's so much you have to get done beforehand. Now, you brought up, that people should work with their veterinarian. I'm asking this question for clarity. So I know you need an accredited veterinarian to sign off on some of the paperwork. So are people supposed to go to their veterinarian and then go to the accredited veterinarian, or should they go look for an accredited veterinarian
So
first?
you always get me on that and clarify. You are totally correct. Your veterinarian that signs these documents must be USDA accredited veterinarian. So not all veterinarians are. So you might have to research that to make sure they have the accreditation. And guess what? If one veterinarian in the hospital is accredited and the others aren't, he cannot have the umbrella for everyone. It's that one veterinarian, their accreditation and everything has to be stated, and they're responsible for that animal.
Then I wonder if there's a website that has all the contact information for accredited veterinarians
There,
that people can go to.
there is, and I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head, but if you go to the USDA website, and it might be something like find a USDA accredited veterinarian or something like that. Search that way, and you can find which veterinarian accredited in your particular state in your region.
Yeah, that might, for somebody who is a serial entrepreneur, that might be a good thing to get into, is to create a database or a website that is, pet parent friendly, that has that resource on there, all the listed accredited veterinarians.
Mhm.
And then just make it so that veterinarians maintain their own accounts and keep it updated, because that's got to be one of the frustrating parts. First, that dealing with some of these agencies, it's going to take longer than a day or a week to turn something around. You got a timeline that where you got to be somewhere. It almost everything you got to go through for your pet. You almost got to wonder what comes first, the chicken or egg? Do I get all this done before I plan my trip, or do I plan my trip and then go get all this done? Because, like you mentioned, depending on where you're going, if I have a trip to Brazil this summer, is that enough time to get everything done? And as a pet parent, I don't know. And there's no place to go that says, here are your steps. That's just.
I totally agree with you, Greta. You do a search, they'll say you need a health certificate or international health certificate, and they make it seem like it's a simple process or just one simple document, but it isn't. It's going to vary by country. So, like I said, start early in the process. If you say, hopefully, months out, you know you're going to be going to a different. Maybe say if you're doing a move or you just travel. If you know in advance, let your accredited veterinarian know of this process. But I
Yeah.
agree also, there needs to be a way to streamline the process for the pet owner too, in reference to this, where they can find these individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. I do know there is some good resources out there. So our friends from Positively, is it
Positive
Positively Pet
health.
Health Certificate?
Mm-hmm.
They are great, a great resource to help people. I know they help to complete the pet health certificate. I'm not sure if they do anything more, but as far as the doctors are concerned and all that good stuff, at least there's somebody who can handle that headache for you. So I definitely recommend that to everyone. Our guest, she's in the green room, but Rochelle just shared with us to a link to share with everyone all the good information that we were just talking about. So I highly suggest that people who are watching this, with everything we're talking about, this would be the link to do a vet search. So I'm glad that she found that. That's great. Thank you so much, Rochelle. Um, so let's see. It is, well, let me look at my clock. It is 10 after. So
Mhm.
we should bring our guest Rochelle on so that we can continue this great conversation. So let's see here.
Hey, lady.
Hi, Miss Rochelle.
Hello.
Now, I am actually, what I am doing right now, I am paying attention, but I had forgotten to pull up our magic applause button. So if everyone could help us welcome Miss Rachel Watkins Rogers. Okay, I just pushed it.
Wow, that's the first time I've heard it.
So I had to make sure we got it for you. Oh, how are you, Rochelle?
Oh, I've been doing great. Been super busy. This is a time of the year before it gets hot. People are shipping animals, so a lot of people have been working on projects that I've been helping out with. So it's been really fun.
Oh, that's great. So, if I remember correctly from when a conversation you guys had before, I guess your spring and your fall are your busiest seasons.
Yes, that's your shipping window is before it gets too hot and before it gets too cold. And depending on where you're shipping from and to, that window can be really slim. So if you're in Miami and you're shipping to Cali, Colombia, it's almost the same temperature. So you have to really be careful that you hit that window at the right time, especially if you got permits, because
Right.
the federal permits are only good for 6 months. And so you may have to renew them before you can ship and hit that window.
Absolutely. Well, for people who will watch this and are meeting you for the first time, Rochelle, could you do us a favor and just give us a brief
The
synopsis
short
of who you
version.
are?
Yes. So basically, I said the short version because I started working as a child in zoos, a child volunteer. They don't allow kids as young as I was now to volunteer with the animals that I used to work with. But I started out at the Louisville Zoo and worked my way to other zoos, San Diego, Jackson, Mississippi, El Paso, Texas, Parrot Jungle, Monkey Jungle, Zoo Miami. I worked at twice as the registrar and as a zookeeper. And my two favorite zoos that I worked at was San Diego Zoo and Zoo Miami.
Oh,
Because yeah, Miami, because it's like the tropics and the animals look great and they just have, more access to the sun year round. San Diego Zoo was one of my favorite zoos to work in because they had so much what I call keeper enrichment, because there was researchers that worked with keepers. There was the opportunity to network with those people. I saw Jane Goodall. I saw, it was
wow.
an amazing place to work as far as that goes. Their research department was very inclusive with the zookeeper staff. So that was kind of cool.
That's great. I have to ask. So you mentioned you were very young when you started. Did you ever feel like you were walking food, that the animals were just looking at you, licking their lips?
Actually, no, because I'm from a third generation animal training family. So I grew up as a child before I started working with animals. And you get, it's almost like, a child can learn a language quicker than an adult. Your mind, there's a period of time in your mind where you're absorbing things, and I absorbed things about animal behavior or being able to evaluate an animal's behavior that was not taught to me, that I just kind of learned as I went along, and then that was to my benefit when I got older and started working in zoos where they train you how to do trained observations and things like that. And I was able to write papers as a keeper about observations of introductions of animals and hand rearing animals and things like that. So I had a lot of training early on, and I just loved to write. So I published a lot of papers as a keeper. about animal subjects.
That's
That's
awesome.
fantastic.
Yeah.
You have a unique skill to you, and it's like a second nature. So that's
Right.
really
Second
remarkable.
nature. That's the best way to explain it. It's part of my DNA. I mean, it's not something I can say, this is where I learned this. It's just the way I grew up.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have you here today. I love how we bring you back periodically to bring on these great topics to talk about. And I know today we're talking about feeding during transport, which was very interesting to me because number one, I didn't even think that animals could eat during transport. So I would love for you to tell us about feeding and transport and everything that relates to it.
Yes. So the it's it, there are species like hummingbirds that if they do not continuously feed, they can die before they get to their destination. They run out of calories because their metabolism is at such a high rate. And then there are animals like carnivores that even in a zoo, one day a week, the carnivores are fasted and they call it bone day. They only get bones. So you can
Mhm.
fast a carnivore and prepare them for shipment that way, and it's according to the IATA LAR because their digestive system is completely different. Other species, they tend to um, expel a lot of liquid when they pass their waist and they can get dehydrated easily. I know at one point I worked in a research lab setting, and they were using this gel product to replace the water for the animals, and they got
Mm.
used to eating that, and it had electrolytes. You can put
Mhm.
vitamins in it. It's very handy if you can get your animal to accommodate eating that, because then you don't have to worry about the liquid, because if the liquid comes out of the crate, you can short out the electrical system in the plane and bring it down.
Yeah, that's the gel water you're talking about.
Yes.
Mhm. You know what? Let me back up a little bit. I'm gonna give a correlation with puppies at least. Those toy little breeds, little teacups, little chihuahuas or puppy Shih Tzus or Lhasa Apsos. These little dogs, they have to be fed like every 3 hours. So they don't do well
Really?
for air travel. They need to be a little bit older because they honestly that period of time, say if it's a flight, they can go have hypoglycemia, and it's actually a situation. It's like a medical crisis. They can actually die because they don't have enough food in their system.
Wow.
So the teacup versions of these different breeds, since
Mhm.
they need to eat and drink so much, wouldn't they come in cabin so that either the parent or the handler would be able to give them something?
Ideally, that would be best, but you could say prior to COVID, a lot of it was pet breeders that ship puppies, and they want to ship them early as possible. Most people with their puppies after 8 weeks. And as far as regulations, most airlines will accept them as long as they're over 8 weeks. Now Delta's different. We've raised it to 12 weeks because we want to make sure that they're old enough to sustain themselves, and everything. But prior to COVID, this happened quite often and everything. So
Wow, that's amazing. So um, and I'm asking, I guess, to both of you. So with the animals that I guess it's hummingbirds on one end and the teacups, since you have to feed them more often. So does that mean with the hummingbird you're pulling over on the side of the road, or are the hummingbirds in cabin?
No,
And
actually, it's incorporated into the shipping container type that you use that's in the IATA live animal regulations. You actually have to have a light in the cage that you ship them in so they can see the food, because if they don't see the food, they won't eat the food. And then you have a nectar feeder in there that you can put the nectar in. And sometimes if they do eat like any types of fruit or anything like that, they'll put that in there as well. But typically they just eat the nectar. And
Is,
it's,
is the nectar in a rabbit bottle?
no. It's in a container that is, and not a lot of it, because they can't put a lot in there because it might move around and come out. But it's a like it's sort of like a hummingbird feeder that you see hanging. It's like a dish
Yeah.
with holes in it, so they stick their beak in it and they lick the nectar out of that. But also, feeding in transit, like if you're doing a land transport, that's no big deal. You pull over to the side of the road. But if you're doing an air transport, once you leave the ground, that's it. You lose control unless you're in a courier service like FedEx or UPS or some other type of plane where you're in a cargo plane or in a regular cargo plane where you're in a jump seat and the animals on the other side of the cargo netting, and you can get out. And I've flown that way before with infant apes and monkeys that had to be coddled or taken care of. You normally would take them in a plane, but we did go one time to New York when I was working at Monkey Jungle, Parrot Jungle, to do a TV show in New York. And we went FedEx, and I was in the jump seat, and the pilot said, as soon as we get in the air, you can unstrap and go check the babies. And that was the coolest flight I ever took a baby on, because it was like, okay, now I'm not stressed and they can see me. So they were cool, and it was an orangutan and a capuchin monkey baby. And so it wasn't like a teeny tiny baby, but they were young animals, too young to be shipped in cargo. Yeah.
That's the coolest thing about FedEx and all them with the cargo ship, not ships, aircraft. But the interesting thing, I've had the question before. Someone asked, "Can pets in a commercial airline? Is there somebody to check on pets during transport?" And the answer is no. I always go back to saying, we watch a lot of movies, and they'll show someone in the in cabin, and they go ask the
snakes on the plane.
Yeah, that I'm aware of that. The flight attendants don't go down. No one goes down to check any animals. So it is a practice in situations like this. These animals that have a unique feeding requirements and everything. So
and there's a lot of requirements. It's not a walk in the park. You have to provide all the identification of the people going. You have to, they have to be cleared.
Oh yeah.
Security clearance. It's then you have, it's like a more advanced type of planning too, because you have to go through all those steps before you're even allowed to do it. So.
Absolutely. Well, I didn't even realize that people could be in cargo. I've always imagined that that's where they throw the luggage and the crates with the animals, but I didn't know that a human could be down there with the animals themselves.
Yeah, it has
so
to be
cool to
in a climate controlled cargo. Not every plane has a climate controlled cargo bay.
But
so that's why you run into problems if you're doing a connecting flight. And that's why zoos like a direct flight, because they know the crate fits through the door. It's got a climate controlled cargo, and it's going to go from point A to point B. You reduce and minimize any emergencies or issues by being able to expedite it that way. When you have to make a connecting flight, that's when things can go wrong, because unless you have an attendant with the animal, it can miss a flight, and then that can start a scenario where it's missing when it's supposed to get there. And, it's just, there's so many things that you have to track that people don't realize.
I'm glad you put that up, Michelle. But as far as she was able to go to cargo with those animals, she was on a cargo freighter type aircraft. You were on a commercial aircraft, correct?
I've done it with commercial airlines before, but this is like back in the 90s when it was a lot more lax. I mean, I had one of those soft-sided bags with a small baboon, baby baboon in it. But I would not like to do that again now. You have to worry that the animal's not going to freak out, because then what are you going to do? You can't like just take your baby baboon out and hold it like a human infant. All the people start seeing it, then she freaks out, she starts screaming, it causes an incident.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm also glad you brought up the fact that as far as your best bet for any type of animal is a direct flight
Yes.
to that location. Because if there's a transfer, sometimes, again, things happen. If there's a change in an aircraft, not all aircrafts are capable of transporting animals. So you have to realize that. So I always say, think about it. If we're at a gate, your gate, and they have a gate change, very likely that gate changes because you're changing aircrafts on you.
Right.
Now, you might have your pet on that aircraft, but it doesn't necessarily mean, and when I say pet, as far as in cargo,
Right.
he may not be able to go to that next aircraft because it may not be capable of handling animals. So be mindful of that.
Right. Yes, and once you hand off the animal, then that activity is regulated. It has to be by people that are licensed and have the proper credentials to be able to deal with the animal. That's why IATA started their live animal certification for cargo handlers, because that's to improve the welfare of the animal. If the cargo handler understands the urgency, understands the animal can get stressed out, they can do a better job at loading that crate on and off the plane, or monitoring it, or telling somebody, I think this animal needs to be checked out, it doesn't look good, or something like that. Because like with I worked with koalas in San Diego, and they sleep 20 hours a day. They don't have a lot of behaviors, but with this one behavior they would have looked like they were just scratching themselves. That was a sign of stress. When a koala scratching itself over and over, it's like a nervousness, and it's a sign of stress. And the zookeepers know that, but an average person looking at a koala just goes, "Oh, the koala's scratching itself." So
He's got
if
fleas.
that increases, that can escalate into stress. Their core body temperature can heat up. They can get overheated. They can dehydrate faster. I mean, there's all kinds of things and health things that can escalate after that.
So this question is for both of you. With any animal, whether it's a pet or a research animal or a zoo animal, what is the best airline to utilize for its transport? Is it a American Airlines Delta, or is it a FedEx UPS?
So I would, for one, say it should be an IATA member. Not every airline is an IATA member. It should be the one that has the best flight for your shipment of where it's coming from and going to. And not every, for zoo animals, Delta is the only airline that will fly venomous animals for zoos.
Right.
There are other airlines, there are breeding programs that have been shut down because the United airline flight that used to go direct from the United States to Guam, there's two species of birds that are no longer being reintroduced, and they had to change their breeding strategies because they didn't want to have a bunch of surplus birds in the facilities that were breeding them. And that was also meaning you could fly from Canada to Guam, but then you have to do an import permit and an export permit. And so then that means the animals have to stay there. They can't just go in transit, import, export, so it complicated the situation to the point that they had to shut down the program until they resolved this issue. And they've been in negotiations for years with United, trying to resolve it, to figure out how they can mitigate this problem for that species.
Right. Definitely familiar with that situation.
Yeah.
They're definitely, and it's difficult because I would say Delta doesn't go directly to Guam. So you'd have to go into Hawaii. Then you have to go through customs. Just be aware.
Hawaii's tough.
United States. It is the United States, but it's a rabies-free state, and they have stronger regulations as far as importing animals, any type of animal. So you would have to clear requirements there, and then go off to Guam from Hawaii, and it's
Right. And
complicated.
in case people don't realize, Guam is a possession of the United States, so you do not need a permit to ship an animal to Guam because it's considered a domestic shipment. It would
Mhm.
be like going from California to Florida because it's a possession. It's or Puerto Rico is also a possession. You don't need a import or export permit. So that's what facilitated the Puerto Rican crested toads being able to be reintroduced to the wild because they had that free flow ability to ship animals, and they would just get like a permit through the service, through the Fish and Wildlife Service, and then all the zoos would be under that permit where they were allowed to ship an endangered species, to that island routinely.
Okay. I know one of the slides that we had created was discussing fasting the animals. And why is that important?
I don't know. I didn't get let Dr. Nelva talk on the last question. You want to start with this one?
This one,
Yeah.
why fasting? Well, you have a different perspective because you're
Yes.
dealing with different animals. Now, when it comes to your dogs and cats primarily, they're saying they should be fed at least 4 hours prior to departure. And actually, USDA Animal Welfare has a requirement that you must attest that they've been fed at least 4 hours prior to transport, or arrival to the airport,
Right.
and everything. Now, during transport, we don't feed them. And actually, as far as regulations, they're required to be fed within 24 hours, every 24 hours, basically, as far as pets. They're required to have water every 12 hours. So, but
So
yeah, but
when we
yeah,
build our
fasting is something
crates
we
for
deal with here.
exotic species, it has to be made in such a way that if there is an in transit stop and the animal needs to be fed and watered, that there are instructions, that there's food because they have special diets for zoo animals, and that there's a way to feed the animal without coming into contact with it because you may have a cargo attendant and not an animal attendant doing that feeding. If it is considered too dangerous of an animal to do that with, then the zoo may choose to have somebody go with the animal to do that feeding. But you also have to think about emergencies. There's the new contingency plan rule, and part of that rule is also not just what do you do with an animal when there's an emergency. It would be how do you feed and water if there is an unplanned stop, if the plane has a mechanical failure. And we had a situation happen with an import I was working on where there was actually a weather event. There was a volcano, and that volcano started a domino effect of things that could happen. The plane was supposed to stop there and refuel, but the elephant was not going to be coming out of the plane, so it was called in transit. And if that volcano were to impact the island that they were landing on, Honolulu, the airline's landing strip would have been flooded because a tsunami can happen. And the zoo, which is near the airport, was our backup plan for if we ran into problems with the elephant, that the zoo would help us. They would have been also flooded from the tsunami. So it, and my permit said they were going from Australia, pit stopping to refuel in Honolulu, and coming to Miami International Airport. That plane is not allowed to go anyplace else other than what the permit says. So I had to make an emergency call to all the regulators and notify them we had a problem. This might happen. And one of the regulators, I must not have gone into detail enough, said, well, but your permit doesn't say that you can do that. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to give them links to maps and the emergency site for Hawaii and blah, blah, blah. And when I sent the second email, they said, oh, we understand. That's no problem. Thanks for notifying us. Because that meant they were aware. So if we did have to veer off the plan, we had permission to do that. The reason why it would have been an emergency.
Okay.
Right?
Yep. And the elephant got hay throughout the flight because the elephant was the only animal, it was the only cargo on the plane. And they had a veterinarian, they had the curator, they had the zookeepers, they had anybody that might need to respond to any situation that animal might go through. And he was trained for like a year to be in that crate because from the time zones he was going through, he technically was in the crate for more than a whole day. It was like a day and a half kind of. And then when you tack on the pre-flight travel to the airport and loading and all of that, then landing, then going to the zoo, it could have been close to 2 days the animal was in the crate. So even an ungulate, which is, they eat roughage and don't eat meat, or, they might eat some fruit or something, but they need to keep food in their gut so they don't get, a gut torsion or something like that. So they can have a problem if their intestines got, twisted around. They die in like 4 hours.
Wow.
I mean, there's even dogs, I'm sorry. There's a condition in dogs like gastric dilatation and volvulus, where if you feed them and give them too much water right after they run around, they can twist their stomachs.
Right. Vomiting, they can vomit, they can drown in their vomit, they can have too much feces and urine in their crate and be all messy. I mean, the food, even though they need the food, it's something you have to incorporate in your planning because depending on the species, you may or may not have to feed them during transport, or you may or may not be able to fast them before transport.
Wow. So you didn't get a chance to answer, unless I missed it, but Rachel, do zoo animals fast prior to transport? And then I want to get into the carnivores.
Yes, some species, it's similar to the dogs, the way Dr. Bryant discussed. Other species, like I mentioned, the hummingbirds, the elephants, that's like 2 ends of the spectrum on diets. But if they need to have the food, it's attached to the crate with instructions how to feed them. But typically, zoo animals do not get food in the crate. And even like if you're doing an international transport, you have to be careful, not only the food you put in the crate, you might need a permit for that, but the bedding you put in the crate, you might need a permit for that, or it may be prohibited to use the type of bedding you want to use for the animal.
Okay. Well, what about, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say one more comment about that. There's even restrictions on coming into the United States as far as the bedding that potentially dogs or other animals can be exposed to, because they're worried about potentially transmitting foreign animal diseases in that, so you got to be really, really careful.
Yes. Well, and with the wood, some countries only allow heat treated wood, and it has to have a stamp on it or it won't be allowed in the country, because the heat treating prevents insects from entering the country that could be in the wood. Like you could be bringing in termites, you could be bringing in all kinds of things in the wood of a crate if you don't have the right type of wood for the crate.
Okay. Well, what about carnivores?
Carnivores can be fasted for up to a day and still be, compliant with the regulations.
Well, why do they fast longer?
So meat-eating animals, they have a higher calorie diet, and their digestive system has to work really hard to digest that meat. And so they can go longer. That's just like in the wild, they'll say they fast or they binge. They like a tiger can eat so much meat in the wild that it just has to lay there until that meat gets digested and their abdomen can be distended. I've even seen pictures of tigers in the wild laying in a pool of water to help with the pressure on their stomach from eating such a big carcass. And so leaf eating animals, you like koalas had to be eating as they're flying too. So but some countries it's like, what kind of plant are you bringing in? It's eucalyptus. Well, we don't know if we'll allow eucalyptus in the country, so they had to get like special permission. A lot of times the koalas would fly in the cabin because they had to be cared for throughout the flight by the zookeeper. And in some cases, like when I worked in Miami during Hurricane Andrew, I had just started working in San Diego and had to do an interview and found out that the koalas had to be evacuated because with a hurricane, all the trees get denuded of leaves. And that meant that their farm for raising the browse for the koalas was destroyed and they had no food for them. So they got a private jet and they escorted them to the airport and they were evacuated back to San Diego.
Are there a lot of zoo animals that utilize jets?
You mean private jets?
Yeah.
It's really expensive. And if you are a big zoo that's shipping a lot of animals, it can really hit your budget hard. So that's why they try to do, like crate sharing, like some zoos may be small and only ship a bear once every 10 years, or maybe never until they tear down the exhibit and build a new one. But big, heavy crates like that are expensive to maintain, keep in good working condition. So there's a sharing of even appropriate type crates for animals that are specialized. And if you look at crates for zoo animals, they can be tall and skinny. They can be short and flat, like for reptiles. For hoof stock, it's got to be tall and skinny. For elephants, they're metal. That's a very expensive shipment. It can cost up to $500,000 or more to ship an elephant.
So why are you building the crates? Is there a store like a Petco you can go to buy crates for zoo animals, or are you're customizing?
So we really like it when we look at the IATA LAR and we see that little crate icon. It's like, cool, we can use an airline kennel, but we have to pick those wisely too, because some of the companies give you the illusion that crate is approved by the airlines, approved by IATA. And so the zoos have to do their due diligence and make sure and check out the company. Then once you get that crate, the crate still has to be modified, even for a dog. So for an animal like, an exotic species, it may have to be modified more. So like when we were importing some sloths from Panama one time, we sent the crates with the people that were going to get the animals and broke them down so they were smaller to fly in the cargo bay. And then when they got there, they put the crates together. But inside the crate, the IATA LAR said they have to have a piece of wood or something that the animal can perch from 2 inches from the top of the crate. So Rochelle took a picture with a ruler by the wood showing that it was 2 inches to get the crates approved, because we didn't want to have a problem. Because once they left the country, that's it. They could only get what they could get in Panama. Here we could prep everything, get it ready, fix it so it's ready to go, and then use it over there and come back. So you want to make sure that you are reading and adapting that air kennel to everything that the LAR says for you to get it accepted by the airlines. And there was even a guy from San Diego, he's retired now, but he built crates for them for 20 years. He had this really cool idea that I had never heard of, where you could put a solar fan on the top of the crate. And in the event that crate was in the sun, the fan would kick on and it would cause ventilation in the crate so that the animal had air going in and out of the crate, and it kept it cooler for the animal.
That's
So
interesting.
there's things that we come up with that we out of necessity, necessity is the mother of invention, and there's people that figure these things out in zoos because our animals have such unique needs.
All right, I'm going to go back to reiterate what you said because it's really important. When you in the item, yes, it's going to be a little emblem that designates that you can use the pet travel crate. That crate must meet the requirements of CR1.
Right.
And then be modified in accordance to the container requirements of that animal.
Right.
A lot of people forget that. And what they'll do is they'll buy a crate on the commercial market that says airline compliant, which is not, and think that it's perfectly fine. So then if they're denied, they don't understand and everything. So it's CR1 and then modified in accordance to that container requirement in that particular animal.
Yeah.
And trust me, I've seen lately people trying to modify crates and say for a bird shit, it needs to have a perch. The latest one I saw, which made me laugh, is they had I said they had a 2x4 in there. It was a ledge. It wasn't a perch that they can grasp on, and I don't think people understand that. But,
well, and padding, we were exporting a harpy eagle to Panama, and they wanted to see that we put padding on the top. So if the bird hit the top of the crate, that its head didn't hit the hard surface.
Right.
So padding on the inside. And it's got to be something that the animal is not going to destroy, ingest, get stuck in, because you could lose them in shipment that way. So, and even like food that they might normally get while they're at the zoo, that type of food might not be appropriate for transport because they could choke on it or something, so you got to be careful, like how you prepare the food, what it is, and if they even need it at all, because if you can fast them before transport, they're less likely to get, because they're like people. Sometimes some of them get motion sickness, and that makes them vomit. And if they're, in the crate and they choke on it, they could die from that. They can aspirate and die after transport. Right. There's a window after transport where you have to really watch the animal, and they're in quarantine anyway, so they're really being monitored closely. But a lot of animals die after transport, and it's from unseen things that you didn't know were a problem for them. They could have had an undiagnosed medical condition. They could have had a weak heart. They could have had, so that's why the pre-ship physical is really detailed in zoo animals, because there's so many things, there's so many species that the veterinarian has to learn about. It's not like humans where a doctor can have their whole career be on just the heart or just the brain or just the eyes. In zoo animals, there's thousands of species, and the veterinarian has to know something about all of them, and they may be expert in a certain species or group of animals, but they got to work with animals that they are not going to be expert in. And that's why, a veterinarian told me one time, that's why we call it practicing medicine, because sometimes you're practicing something that nobody knows about, or how to do it, or things like that. So research is always so important.
Yeah. You're so amazing, Michelle, because you bring up so many things, the points. I want to bring up something for our pet owners, specifically for dogs. A lot of folks like to put in things that the dogs are comfortable with, toys, what have you. But you shouldn't put that in the crate with them because of, again, the choking hazard. I'm sure you've seen on TikTok or these other things where they show the dog had a ball lodged in his throat and the efforts to get that out. You don't want anything like that to happen during transport.
So, well, and even some people will put towels in with dogs. I've known dogs that will chew on stuff. They eat the thread. Next thing you know, the thread is in their intestines. That thread in the intestines from a towel can cause a gut torsion. And you can't just pull it out. They have to defecated out. I mean, it's not like something you want to pull, because you could be, hurting their intestines on the
They
inside.
call it plication. Basically, that string could be sitting in the stomach, and the other part is in the colon, and it can pull all the intestines all together. It plicates on itself, so you don't want that
Yep.
to happen. And it's not as
Yep.
simple as pull a string. No, causes a lot of damage.
Right. Yep. So sometimes what seems to be the most obviously right thing is the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, you gotta really follow the policies for the airlines. They'll tell you what's best for the animals, first what can be in the crate with them. They're saying it for a particular reason because
Yep.
something happened in the past. So it's all for the safety of your animal to be transported.
Yep.
Is there a when someone is going with the zoo animal on the transport? Is there like a little manual, like in case of emergency, don't pull the string, or something like that that people have with them?
So with zoo animals, things come up that are not written in anywhere. You could see a behavior that nobody's identified or defined yet. You could see a medical issue that is not written about. So a lot of what is the most important thing for the people that are attending that animal is for them to know the normal behavior of the animal and that animal. It might be normal behavior for elephants to throw hay on their back, but maybe one elephant is the only one that puts the hay between its tusks and walks around with it, so that's a normal behavior, but if you don't know that, you wouldn't know if the animal is at ease and it's just walking around with the food in its tusk, tucked in there.
Yeah.
It's like they use it like a hand.
Yeah. Let me share a funny story that fairly recently happened. There were some possums that were shipped, and on arrival at the destination, they said one was dead, and we were investigating. Oh my goodness, what happened? No problem with the shipping container. Everything was perfect. No delays in shipment. So I reached out to the person and shared the report that we didn't find anything significant that happened. And then the response was, "Oh, the opossum is alive and well. It was playing possum." It's alive. Yep, opossum. He was playing possum. So
And that's a normal behavior for them.
that's what they do. But
And now you know.
and I'm sure you would be more familiar with that if it was zoo animal. But in this environment, they were like, "Oh my God!"
Right.
Yeah,
It's difficult for everybody to be an expert on everything. You don't go through your life knowing everything. There isn't a pill you can take. It takes a lot of hard work, reading, observation, practice. That's why, like, even just teaching people in a zoo how to ship animals is one of the most important things you can do for the animal. Because if the people that are involved with the transport know what they're doing, they're familiar and they're trained, that's better than people doing things that they don't know what they're doing. And that's why I was so happy when I saw that live animal certification for cargo handlers, because, people are always scared when the animal gets out of their hands. What's going to happen to it? Who's going to be in contact with it? Are people going to be sticking their fingers in and maybe get bit? Or, that's why they have to have a privacy, like a piece of cloth or something to close the openings. But the ventilation has to be able to still go through, but it gives the animal a feeling like, oh, I can hide now. I don't, and it helps them get through those places where there's stress. When we were shipping otters have to be shipped at 70 degrees or less, but not lower than 40 something. And the reason being, they have a special physiological problem that when they get stressed out, their core body temperature goes up. So they can be just sitting there and look normal, but if they're sitting there stressed, it's just like a person with a heart condition. Their body temperature goes up. So if you ship them at what's considered 80 degrees, it has to be 80 degrees or less. You could kill them in transport if they get stressed out.
I tried to tell my Uber drivers that too. That I need it between 70 and 40. And don't stress me out.
That's good to know. Greta has temperature limits. That's good.
There you go.
Man,
Oh,
but look at this. Time is flying. Wow.
Oh my God.
Look at
Okay.
it. Love it. Love it.
that means we had a great time and talked about great stuff. It's
Cool.
always a fun time having you on here, Rachel. I learned so much, and it's
Oh.
so interesting. I have one question. It's, like with anything, for me, communication is paramount.
Oh
So
yes.
it seems like with dealing in the zoo industry, you guys have to be on top of your communication, especially like I would imagine during the transport, you must give reports and maybe even a
Yes.
section of this behavior happened and that gets flagged and
So
so
it
that people
depends
are aware.
on how frequently that the institution is shipping animals, but it's not unusual to have a weekly meeting where you discuss all the cases, all the shipments, all the permits, because that's a part of a zoo business that is critical to really doing a good job at managing your collection. If you can't get the daughter out, she's going to get bred by her father. If you can't get the birds out, they're going to be too crowded, and maybe people are going to, birds, I say people, it's an animal. Maybe the birds are going to get into a fight because of aggression and not having a space to go to. So there's so many different aspects of animal management that are hinging on being able to move animals from point A to point B.
And you know what? And what I try to do, at least with Delta, I try to explain to everyone the importance of what we're doing as far as animal transportation. Because
Yes.
as far as with zoo animals, working with us as a team, we're helping to assist you with the conservation efforts of that species and everything. So it's very important that the zoos know that we're a team. Let's work together.
Right.
Sure, there
It is a partnership.
containers and everything for the safety of animals, and just that communication needs to be, like I said, shared with us as well in the airline industry.
Exactly.
Absolutely. That, as you mentioned, that is really crucial. And, also as you're working closely with the zoo, I guess, organizations, the airlines I'm speaking about, you can also learn from those opportunities when you're dealing with pets, and things to that nature, because Rochelle, so many times you've pointed out how it's all the same thing, because, whether
A
they're pets
hyena
or
is like a pit bull. I mean, a horse is like a zebra. I mean, a zebra might be a little bit wilder. That's the only thing about our animals are more unpredictable than a domesticated animal. But it's still it's an animal with a biology and a physiology that has to be addressed and accounted for to have a safe, humane, expedient transport.
And just to add to what you're saying for your pet owners, during a stressful environment as travel, even your pet that you think you know so well and how they behave, they can change on you during that process because it's stressful and it's an environment. So your mild-mannered dog that never did anything might try to rip out of a crate because he's not, well, number one, you haven't acclimated him and gotten ready for that travel. So you just be aware they're unpredictable too in this environment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, the more you include your partners are your wildlife agencies where you get your permits, the law enforcement. If you're shipping an elephant, you get, an escort to and from, because, there are groups out there that don't want you to have that elephant, and they'll do anything they can to mess it up. So for the safety of the people and the animals, we usually get escorted by law enforcement. And if there's death threats for a transport like that, then FBI gets involved, and, it becomes a higher profile transport.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, time, as you mentioned, Dr. Bryant, has flown by so fast. That's why we keep bringing you back, Rochelle, because we can't get it all in our hour. It was another great conversation, and I'm always fascinated, and I learned so much from each of the conversations. Is there any last words either one of you would like to say to everyone?
I'm good.
I'm good. Thanks for listening in. This is
See
awesome.
you next time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for another Facebook Live with Dr. Nelva Bryant. And today our returning special guest, Rachel Watkins Rogers. We all had a great time with you, and I hope you did with us. So
I
until
always
next
do.
time,
Bye,
absolutely.
guys.
Don't click off.
Bye-bye.
Don't click.
Stay there, Rachel. I'm just going to end the broadcast.
Okay.
Let's see. I pushed the button. I don't know if it ended, though.
Not yet.